Hey guys, good evening. Welcome to the Friday night live stream. My name is Steve Richert. I am an adventure photojournalist, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that my favorite thing is being outside with a camera. And this channel is all about telling your story with a camera. And the outdoors is where my camera typically takes me when I'm able to have any say in the matter. And being a photographer, being a filmmaker, and being on YouTube here has really changed my life in a lot of ways. Just given me a great awareness about the value and the benefit that comes in terms of my own life, just that I get from making stuff just by doing this. And so that's part of what I hope to be able to bring to you guys on this channel. And every Friday night I do a live stream, which is generally pretty informal, pretty casual. During this time, I love to turn things over to you guys. If you have questions, comments, we can talk about any of the videos that I made during the week, editing, storytelling, YouTube. We can talk about photography. We can talk about cameras, gear, if you want. This is the time when I kind of, catch you up on a few things that I'm doing, but I really like to open up these Friday night live streams for you guys to bring your questions, your thoughts, and your comments. So while I am going to just tell you a little bit about what I have going on and the inspiration for what I'm bringing to this conversation tonight is, discussing a new documentary project and getting that effort off the ground. I would love it for you to interrupt and just shoot questions at me or what have you. And tonight I don't have a really tightly conceived monologue to give to kick things off, which may be a good thing, because I spent the better part of this week editing my face off. I have been really busy. I have been trying to get some videos done ahead of time to put in the queue here for you guys, so that every Tuesday and Thursday I have a video set up for you. And there's every time I make one video, I think of something or somebody asks me a question and I say, I should do a video about that. And so I'm really starting to dig into now a little bit more the conceptual and creative process of storytelling and where that is going for me, and also ways that I think that I can help you guys with storytelling, because everybody is doing some kind of storytelling, even if you don't think of yourself as a filmmaker necessarily. People are doing all this stuff on social media, and storytelling and documenting things is something that is much more of a fluid concept now, and that's partly why I have embraced the self-identification as an adventure photojournalist, which sounds a little bit maybe a little bit much, but effectively that's what I'm doing. I'm spending as much time as I can outdoors or on adventures around people, and then trying to document that, even if those people are oftentimes people in my family. I don't think that makes it any less valuable or legitimate one way or the other, and we can still learn and improve our technique. And I have been, in addition to getting videos queued up here on the channel, I have been editing the piece that I shot with the Fuji X-T2 in Oman. The Rhythm of Oman is what I wound up calling that. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to check that out here on the channel. I kind of made the title sound a little bit like Watchtower of Turkey, but I didn't want to go with a watchtower, like a straight across comparison. But that video really did inspire me a lot, not to try to copy it exactly, but to try to implement and learn some of the techniques that I forget the guy's name. It's Alessandro del something. I can actually probably find it here if I look just a little bit, but no, I can't find it that easily. But hey, Ali, how are you? Welcome to the live stream. Good to have you here. But my goal with that piece was just to really learn techniques, because as much as it's difficult to let go of the finished product that we see in our head, I think it's really important to just, at a certain point, and for me this usually happens as a result of frustration, where I'm just like, the hell with this, which is usually that's the point at which I start to make progress on the edit that I'm doing, is when I let go of the preconceived notion that I have of like, this has to be perfect. and I say, you know what, this is not going to be perfect, so let me figure out what this is going to be, and I'm going to make it the best of that, whatever it's going to be. And that's kind of what happened to me with the, and I posted a vlog earlier this week about, that I hate storytelling, and, I just got to that point where I was locked in this steel cage deathmatch with the edit, and it was so irritating and so frustrating, and it's like, there's always things that you find out after the fact that you're like, damn it, I should have shot this way, or should have shot that way, or I should have stayed. It's like you have a really good shot, but you forgot and crossed the axis and like crossed on the wrong side of the person. So when you try to use that clip now in your edit, it looks really jingus and weird, and you can't use it. And now you have a beautiful looking clip that is unusable, or, the camera got bumped, or, something happened that just messed up your shot, and you have to deal with stuff like that and take it in stride. And so, hey, Christopher Holiday, welcome from Seattle. Glad to have you here, brother. And so that's part of the stuff that I'm kind of, it's part of the process that you work through, but I really feel like the biggest difficulty with editing is not so much like what you do, it's what you stop doing. And when you let go of stuff and you get rid of stuff and you unburden yourself, then you're free to just let the story come together more naturally. And there's still, a certain amount of like, when you kind of get to that point where the story starts to gel and you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's starting to happen, this is a thing, I can see this coming into focus now. And then once you get it starting to come into focus, then of course, yeah, you do have to go back and pass over it a whole bunch of times. And I realized like 30 minutes before the Rhythm of Oman video posted, that I had spelled rhythm wrong and like every single manifestation. And so I had to do a frantic backtrack through all the videos, all the subtitles, all the titles, the thumbnails, and spell rhythm correctly, which it turns out, despite having been accused of being a grammar Nazi at various points, I still managed to misspell rhythm. It is a difficult word to spell. So that was my, just general approach with that. And between that and then, I am working on organizing all of my Final Cut Pro X libraries, getting everything kind of organized, and then, because I'm starting to actually save my raw video footage, my source files more, so that I can have, not necessarily for B-roll, but just to be able to have, just scenery to use, because I'm starting to delve more into the commercial aspect now of video and photo as well. But video is a new thing for me from a commercial or business standpoint, and so I'm also making a demo reel to be able to showcase what I can do in terms of video editing and shooting for potential clients. So, and tomorrow is my daughter's birthday. Hi, Anthony DePalma. Hey, good to have you here, man. Not often that I have folks from that I know or that I met from Facebook cross over here to YouTube, so it's kind of like, hey, what brings you here? Nice to see you here, man. Yeah, so tomorrow's my daughter's birthday, and of course my wife has been planning and going out of her way she decided to do a birthday party, so that's been a little bit hectic as well, a little chaotic. And then one more thing, there's always that one more thing. Today I officially launched a new documentary effort, and I would say that I'm still in the fishing stages of this project, and I'll get into that and tell you guys a little bit more about that. And I mentioned it previously on other live streams, but I have lived with type 1 diabetes since I was 16, and that's part of what inspired me and motivated me to go out and climb and to do stuff and to adventure. And then sharing that experience is what got me picking up a camera and really got me serious about the creative process that I talk about here, and that I'm still hammering out and learning a whole bunch, because everything that I've learned, I've basically learned from friends and people on YouTube, and so it really gives me a great amount of satisfaction to be able to give back what I've learned, since that's how I got everything that I learned as well, and hopefully in the process distill down the things that I found most useful, so that you don't have to learn from all the mistakes that I've made. And as there's a saying in climbing that says, if you can't be a good example, at least be a terrible warning. So I figure that you can learn from what I'm doing one way or the other. And I can learn from you guys. I always learn a ton from these conversations and from the comments too on the videos. I always get some really insightful comments, which I appreciate. Anyways, the documentary, Type 1 Diabetes, basically there is a shortage, not a shortage, but there is a lack of access to medication that people living with diabetes, like myself, who couldn't prevent this condition and can't cure it, that we are dealing with a situation where our medication costs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like, for some people over $1,000 a month for medication that they need just to be functional and to be a good parent and to be able to work at their job and be able to be a contributing member of society. They're paying that much money a month for a medication that was developed in the 1920s, and the patent was sold for $3, and now the prices have gone crazily off the charts. And really my goal with this project is to really shine a light on people that are living with the real, if I may use the expression, the ass end of the pyramid here, who are really on the bottom of this situation and are struggling. I'm very fortunate to be in a state where healthcare is reasonably affordable. And there are many people who live, actually, to be fair, when I was living in Utah, I love Utah, I love the desert, it's a place that I consider home, but the healthcare there was just so unaffordable that I couldn't afford to be a person with type 1 diabetes and live there. It just wasn't feasible. So that's part of the reason why I'm in Massachusetts until or unless I get enough money to be able to be myself and require that drug that's priced just ridiculously high. So there are so many people that are suffering from this and that are dealing with this, and that their lives are impacted, and I want to give them a voice. I want to give them a platform to speak out, and that's kind of the basis for this documentary project. Hey, Scott's Wild Camper, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words and the compliment about the last film there, the travel film, and I will pass along the birthday wishes to my little girl. Although the tea, I can't help you, I can't pass that along to her. And so yeah, I think that's one of the benefits. That's one of the things that I really like about documentary photography, is just the fact that it really creates a little bit more, like, I've never been funny. I'm not a funny person. I'm not a fun person. I'm really kind of boring. It's an acquired taste, but I've embraced that through documentary photography, because I'm never going to be Casey Neistat. I'm not going to be the guy like high-fiving and playing grab ass with everybody on their rollerboards and skateboards in the middle of Manhattan. Like, that's just not me. If I had $1 million and like somebody said, look, we'll pay you $1 million to be Casey Neistat, like, I mean, I love Casey's work, and I'm not downing or denigrating his style or his presentation, but that's just not me. But documentary stuff is something where I can withdraw a little bit more, I can be a little bit more serious, and I have the opportunity to do something that really feels meaningful to me. And even if nobody else cares about what I'm doing, and even if I'm only documenting my family, that's something that still feels really serious and worthwhile to me. So, I guess everybody has to find their own path there. But one of the things that I'm doing right now, I'm in the fishing phase, where I put out an idea and I say, okay guys, on my Patreon, and I do have a Patreon page, which is, I link it in all my videos towards the bottom, because I don't really push Patreon super hard, at least not at this point, but I'm starting to push it harder, because that is a way to help support the content that I'm making. And so now patreon.com/livingvertical, and if you go there at some point, you can see the budget that I've laid out and the different goals that I have along the way. When I hit each funding goal, each next step in the documentary process that I'm going to begin to take. And so right now it's at the very beginning, and this is the toughest part, because in order to really put some work together and get some momentum, you have to kind of be started on the project, but you can't really start on the project when there's a huge amount of research involved, and then travel to get to the people whose stories you research and that you settle on and that you select. And you have to make enough people believe in what you're saying, and you have to articulate the vision concisely enough that it will grab them and motivate them to be part of what you're doing, to get to that first goal, that first level where you can say, okay, now let's start, at the very bottom, and work our way up and really build something meaningful here that could possibly change people's lives, and maybe change, and maybe even change my life, and I feel like that always happens to me. Anytime I try to tell a story, it always, there's the saying that the camera looks both ways. And I think that's very true. I don't know off the top of my head who said that. Maybe one of you guys are aware. It sounds like something that Nietzsche would say. I know he said the thing about the abyss. If you stare too long into the abyss stares back. Similar concept, I guess, with a camera, but I always feel like I'm learning a great deal about myself when I see the way that I shoot, when I, look back at what I'm shooting and the way that I'm doing things. It's always very beneficial in terms of self-reflection for me, as well. And I that's one of the benefits that I always try to encourage people. Maybe not so much on YouTube, because I think it's implied. I don't go out of my way to say that all the time on YouTube, except for like the intro and the outro of my videos, because I assume that if you find me on YouTube and you've watched my video, then you know kind of who I am, and that's part of my mission, is encouraging people just to do something, to take that first step to tell their story. But like, whenever I meet somebody and they're like, oh, I'm doing this thing, and like, I'm trying to figure out what to do, I'm like, dude, get a camera, like start doing something, just start making something out of what you're doing, because it's going to help you more than you could ever know. And that's at the beginning of this process now, and going into a new documentary project, which is fraught with all kinds of challenges. I'm trying to remind myself of like, okay, like there's something good on the other side of this documentary project, and I'm going to have to dig for a while, blindly perhaps even, to get to it, and to figure out what it is, and to really, wrap my arms around that. But I've done it enough times to where I'm like, okay, you know what, like I'm just gonna suspend my disbelief and my doubt in the process and in myself, and kind of block out the negative self-talk and the doubt and the nobody's gonna care about this and blah blah blah, and just go out there and say, you know what, if I can help one person by doing this project, and I can give one person who is struggling to afford to buy the insulin that they need to live, if I can give them a voice and give them the opportunity to be heard in a way that they did not have access to before, it's probably not gonna, well, it definitely won't cure their diabetes, and it probably will not do anything directly where the pharmaceutical industry is going to be like, oh, stop the presses, here's some free insulin. But it's a step. It's what I have to contribute to society and what I have to contribute to the conversation. And I think that's, and hopefully, what I can do with the videos that I make here is get other people who have that same desire to inspire you guys to go out and do something, Rika, the hopeful voluntarist, herbalism can help diabetes. So I don't disagree that diet and nutrition can definitely have an impact on diabetes. However, one of the big issues that is relevant here is that there are a lot of people who misunderstand the causative elements of diabetes, and basically think that if you have diabetes, it's from eating too much sugar, or that you need to fix your diet and that you can cure diabetes. It can't be prevented, it can't be cured. Now, there are certain things that exacerbate it, and there are certain things that can alleviate it or simplify it, but it's still always a monkey on your back. And especially if you have type 1, because there are some people with type 2 diabetes that don't require exogenous injected insulin to live, but if you have type 1, by definition, you require exogenous insulin. And definitely herbs, and depending on what herbs you take, and in what proportions that work for you, it can certainly help simplifying things. But there's also the bigger picture, is that unfortunate, and see, that's a nuance of diabetes, which I totally am all for. There are a lot of people out there in the, in the world, especially people with diabetes, that get really offended or get really upset when you talk about, the dietary component or the herbal stuff, because of the fact that so many people in the public are just, they will respond to the issue of insulin access by saying, oh, we'll just eat more herbs or fix your diet or run more. And it's like, dude, no, you don't understand. Like, your body, if you don't have diabetes and you're perfectly healthy, your body produces its own insulin. If my body doesn't produce insulin, I will die without this chemical. And I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I've climbed, halfway up El Capitan and Yosemite. I've, traveled around the world. I take care of myself. I've in good shape, and I've always put that effort into my body for 20 years since I've had type 1. And it's not as simple as a lot of people think. So my goal is not necessarily to get into the weeds with the public through this documentary process of saying, like, educating people necessarily, but I think that is certainly a side effect. It's a benefit that people will connect on a human level from doing this, because that's really the big thing, whether it's the nuances of the condition, helping people understand each other, whether it is starting conversations between people who are at the bottom, who don't have access to insulin, who don't have lobbyists speaking for them, who don't benefit from the latest research and the stuff that's happening within even the charities and the nonprofits. Those don't benefit people who are down at the bottom of the the pyramid, who can't afford even the old technology. Like, those are people who need a voice. And hopefully creating some, Humans of New York actually really inspired me a lot, as I'm sure it's inspired countless other people to do similar types of things, where that's why I want to start this as a photo documentary, to start from a very simple level that doesn't require a huge amount of data and time with the editing, but just listening to people's stories, capturing their photo. Because to me, that's something that I'm very excited about, is being able to use still photography to really tell a story. And I think it's a little bit less straightforward. Rika, no worries. Rika said, I'm sorry I wasn't trying to be ununderstanding. Please, I don't take any, no offense whatsoever, and I agree 100%. I just, whenever I have the opportunity to point that out, I like to point it out, because there are other people, I think, that may be watching, or that might watch this after this is aired, who might benefit from just understanding that part of the conversation. And also, there are some people, on the other side, people with diabetes, who get really upset if you talk about diet. And I like to talk about diet, because one of the things, like, living with this chronic illness, it's really been a blessing in a lot of ways. And I know some people don't like hearing that either, but, like, it's been an opportunity for me to learn about the value and the opportunity that comes with challenge in our lives. Like, challenge is something that's always going to be there in one form or another. This just happens to be what I'm dealing with, So Anthony says, let's talk soon. I had a chance to talk to Congress on behalf of the American Diabetes Association. Killer. I've got the ears of several congressmen. Let's absolutely talk. And Anthony, you can shoot me a private message on whatever medium you want to. I think you may even have my phone number. And I definitely would like to, get together and chat with you about this stuff. But yeah, one of the things I have learned is that diabetes has given me an opportunity to measure directly the effects of food and exercise and stress and sleep and all these other things on my body. And I have many, many friends that I grew up with, and I got diabetes when I was 16. And from that point that I was diagnosed, I got very serious about exercise and taking care of my little fill light from the screen there. I got very serious about taking care of myself, because I felt like I was already behind the 8 ball to start. And many of the people that I've gone to college with that I see now, who, have had less motivation because, they don't necessarily have imminent threat looming over them in the form of a chronic illness, they look like 10 years older than me, and I look, when I shave, I don't think I could grow a beard when I was in high school, but I look not very different, aside from a couple of gray hairs, than I did when I was in high school. Like, I've aged pretty gently, and I think a lot of that is as a result of my diet and my exercise and paying attention to stress level. And I would never know what I know about that stuff if I didn't have to know it to deal with this condition. So it's kind of I love getting in there and talking about all the details. And I have a couple of playlists, actually, if you go to my channel. I haven't really made a big deal or made a lot of videos about my diet and the exercise stuff, because my focus is more about telling the story with camera, and there are certain points when my story intersects more directly with my diabetes, and so I definitely will, I always look forward to opportunities to have to talk about that. But on my channel, if you go to my channel page, there's a ketogenic diet playlist at the very bottom there. I have how many videos do I have? I think I have like 10 or 12, 14 videos, something like that, about the ketogenic diet and kind of how that has impacted me, and some how-to stuff, some stuff about diabetes, some stuff about the diet with climbing, and how it's really helped me optimize my athletic performance and my focus mentally. And I've gotten a lot of people even who aren't, who don't have diabetes at all, who've started working on that diet as well, like including my siblings. Scott's Wild Camper says, when you are starting a documentary, do you always have a set agenda, a message, or can it change throughout the filming, editing, and the footage? Awesome question. I think that you may get different answers from different documentarians. One of the guys that I love, I absolutely, like, if I had a hat to take off, I would take off my hat to Griffin Hammond, because he's an amazing documentarian and very, very simple. And like listening to his podcast, it's the Hey Indie Filmmakers podcast, and he has a channel here on YouTube, and I've discovered him actually through the GH5. Imagine that, like searching for gear reviews and stuff like that. He has a lot of great videos. He shoots for or on behalf of Panasonic, and not only is he incredibly knowledgeable, like when I watch a lot of people's channels, there's always the feeling of, a lot of times anyways, there's a feeling of kind of not posturing, but just detachment or superiority. Whereas when I watch Griffin, like, he just seems like the nicest guy and so simple and so helpful. Like, I just like the guy so much, and I always feel so good and so like empowered and confident after watching his stuff. And he makes really good stuff. It's not like he makes bad stuff, and by comparison I'm like, oh, my stuff is good. But it's just, he's very I recommend watching his stuff. I watch his stuff all the time, and I listen to the podcast, I think, more than I watch his YouTube channel. But anyways, different guys have different answers about that question. But in terms of the approach, for me, I like to start with an idea, start with a message, and then I work my way up to it. Now, I have never found myself in a position, and I think that this might change the answer to the question, but I've never found myself in a position where somebody said, here's $50,000, go make this film about this thing. Or here's a person that I'm going to make this movie about, and it's very buttoned up from the beginning. For me, it is absolutely, I have one topic that it's about, really, it's curiosity. And again, this is the way that I like to shoot, because the whole process is an adventure. It's exploration. It's exploring an idea, literally, where you say, I know a couple of these people, I know this topic, I know, and for me, I have always done documentaries about things that I know or that I am part of, so that what or how I'm talking about certain issues is not something that I have to learn. It's like I don't have to refine that fundamental process. I know how to talk about diabetes. I know how to think about diabetes. I know the landscape of diabetes because that's what I live with, or climbing, or camera stuff, or whatever, like the stuff that I make the films about. And so that allows me to have a little bit more of a loose organizational structure, where I would say my approach is oftentimes a shoot them all down and sort them out on the ground type of thing, where I start with something that I'm curious about, that I'm genuinely interested in, with little to no funding, and I say, this matters, this answering this question or addressing this problem, it matters because X, and then I go and I start looking in the most basic format, and I usually start with still pictures and blogging, because you don't really need a lot of fancy stuff to do that, and you get a little bit of support. You get some refinement in those early days when you don't have a bunch of people watching, when it's not in front of, your audience at its, fullest, where you can course correct gradually and nobody's going to like click away from your video if you write a bad blog about it. The only people that are going to read the blog are people that are genuinely interested, and typically people who are kind of bought into what you're doing in the first place, so they're going to give you the best feedback. And it gives you a chance to see a manifestation of your work start coming to life, so that you can say, I like this, I don't like that, this plays really well, this has momentum, that kind of fell flat, or, this person, they have a cool story, but they're terrible on camera. This person, their story seems a little more mundane, but they're just dynamite on camera. They just shine, and then you can kind of tune things up from there and really let it evolve. So I'm a big believer, for my own sake, frankly, because doing a documentary process where I have a cause that I believe in, like I want to draw attention to the issue of people who don't have access to insulin, because that has been me in the past, and that could be me again in the future. And that impacts, I think, healthcare is something that we're impacted a lot more, everybody, regardless of whether you have chronic illness or not. Like, everybody's impacted recently with everything that's been in the news and the insurance, nonsense that's been going on with different Obamacare, and then repealing Obamacare, and then not really repealing it all the way or the right way. And, nobody's happy. So this is something that I know I expect to evolve, but doing something like this where it's a cause that I have personal buy-in into, I need to stay interested. I need to maintain that buy-in. And if I get too rigorously attached to an outcome or a storyline, then that's something that's going to make the difference for me. Michael McNulty says, I do appreciate your sincerity. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your appreciation. The effort that you're putting into this channel and the opportunity allowing us to grow with you in its progression is worth my loyalty. I thank you, and I will keep it up. Thank you, Michael. That means a great, great, great deal. Because this is always going to be slow going for me, because I'm not Casey Neistat, but I've accepted, and I appreciate the fact that there are other people like you guys who accept the fact that I'm not Casey Neistat, and that I can just be me, and hopefully, share the good stuff, and like you said, bring you guys along for that. And so, yeah, I mean, that relates directly to the documentary process and like everything that you're doing, because the documentary that you make is ultimately, on some level, even if you're not appearing in it, it is a reflection of you, ultimately. And so it's really important to, I learned as a first responder that you always have to keep yourself safe before you can help anyone else. And I believe that you have to keep yourself interested when you're doing any kind of project like this that's going to go long term, and you have to build in enough flexibility to say, look guys, and that's why I'm starting this very simply, grassroots, because I do expect it to grow, and I'm starting it as a photo project. When funding and interest moves along, if it gets to that point, then great, then we'll move it into finished mini documentary series about this topic. And I think that there's, my goal is really to have something that would be legitimate photojournalism, and, that hopefully can make an impact, and just reach people, change their lives, give people a platform to be heard who otherwise would not have access to that. And, and uncomfortable conversations, frankly, because, it's not to make like poverty porn, which I think that's typically referred to in terms of like people going to third world countries or developing world countries and taking pictures of people who are, you know, less fortunate. But even within the States and with documentary stuff, there's, you know, a desire on some level to be sensational and to be catchy. And I want to play small ball, as it were, you know, to have little, in the same way that Brandon Stanton, the guy from Humans of New York, that he tapped into. I think that's his name. I get that wrong every live stream. I need to like tape a piece of paper with his name because I always wind up talking about him. And I always forget whether I've forgotten his name. But in short, you know, what he's done really well that has inspired me is where he takes these simple little exchanges with very normal people, in many cases, or people that you wouldn't think as being different or abnormal, and gives you a photo and a quote and a window into some aspect of your life that more often than not evokes a connection or an emotion. And that right there to me is like, that's the aha moment. And that's something that, you know, as much as you go in with your own story, the story that you go in with is really just a starting place. You know, that is a container into which you are pouring reality. And, you know, as you pour your reality into that container of the documentary process, you find leaks, you find holes, you find flies in the ointment that you have to remove. There's all kinds of things that happen along the way. And, you know, that's part of the fun. And you know, that I think it's good to expect that. And I think one of the things that I've learned is just durability, because it's not like you start off like the first little bit, even like, you know, you start to get a little bit of funding, a little backing, people are seeing your vision, people are like, yeah, I'll give you $10 a month, yeah, I'll give you $5 here, yeah, this is awesome, I'm going to share this and tell people. And you go on somebody's podcast and they do an interview with you and everybody's all psyched up, and then it's like, okay, now I have to find a bunch of people anywhere in the country who are living with an obscure disease and are able and willing to share intimate details of their life and their suffering and their hardship, so that you can in turn put that out to the world. And I'm going to have to do that in a way that is sincere, and, you know, in a way that pushes people enough to where it's worth their time, because a lot of times people can't see the value in their own story and they would rather just kind of withdraw, you know. And so you have to be able to push people, but do it in a way that's gentle and respectful, but then also be able to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, so that you don't, you know, overstep your bounds. And that's you know, that's a little bit more, you know, when things start getting real, then it's a little like, ooh, you know, it's a little bit challenging there, and it's less fun. Rika asks, what if you don't ask for money and get writer's block? Now, I'm not sure if you meant what if you ask for money and then get writer's block, like what if you get funding from people and then you can't think of what to do? Is that your question? I might be misunderstanding it. You might want to correct me on that if I have that wrong. But I'll try to answer your question as I'm inferring your meaning from it. Like if you know, get funding and people withdraw, or you find that you're having an obstacle in terms of coming up with ideas or putting the story together, that's a multifaceted answer to that. I think one of the big things is to, and I think this goes for anything creative, it's to shoot what you know. It's talk about what you know. It's like, I know climbing, I know travel, shoestring travel on the cheap, and I know diet, and I know diabetes, and kind of the interaction of those things. It's a weird little nuanced thing, but, you know, and Scott's Wild Camper says, Mel Brooks, The Producers. And I'm familiar with The Producers only from watching Curb Your Enthusiasm when Larry David is gets invited to be play the lead in the producers, and then because Mel Brooks wants to tank the production so he doesn't have to keep doing it anymore. But I will look into that. Excuse me. But I think that if you go into it from the get-go knowing that the topic deeply enough, then the question really only becomes which way do I travel in the landscape, rather than saying there's only one path I'm going down, and if I hit a roadblock in that path, then I can no longer go on. But if you know the entire landscape, you'll feel comfortable being able to say, you know what, I hit a roadblock here, I'm just going to turn around and go over there, because it's in the same landscape and I know enough about this to connect the dots and to make it work. And a lot of it is that, so much of the storytelling process, you have one thing in mind, like you go and you shoot this thing that is your experience, but what you actually create out of that is something very different from what you actually experience, and then it creates some dissonance on your part, because you're looking for something that is more akin to what you actually experience, but then it's not the same, and you don't know how to feel about that because you feel like you're somehow doing it wrong because you're not telling the story that you experienced, and so you feel like it's less truthful, or you're bending stuff, because the reality is that you always have to, especially with video documentary stuff, you're always having to manipulate things and craft a story. It's like, just because something happens and you're recording it as it happens and you're trying to make it very real, there's still a creative element in there in the way that you tell that story and what you emphasize and how you edit things and the music and all these other, the grading and everything that you do. It contributes to the way people ultimately react and what they feel viscerally. And the same thing goes for photos too. It's just that I think with photos it's a little bit less obvious because it's not moving, it's very static, and so you see a photo and it's just like, oh, that was that thing. And like, the truth is that a millisecond before and a millisecond after that photo was taken, the difference between which one of those 3 milliseconds that were captured, which one of those you selected, again, it's all editorial, it's all choices and decisions you make based on the story that you want to tell. So it's definitely not something that I take lightly going into it. And there's also the possibility, very strong possibility, in fact, that, I might try to push this for a while and say, look guys, here's the minimum amount of monthly funding that I need, which right now on my Patreon, I have $197 a month from 20 supporters. So my goal is to get to $250 a month, and at $250 I can say, all right, I'm going to start putting time into researching and into like getting this stuff together. That's enough momentum where I can say, if I put the time into researching and putting my fundraising efforts out there for this film, that it's worth it for me to do that, because on the other side of this research, I'm going to have enough funding to be able to start going and traveling to the places that I need to, and taking the time and, using my equipment and all of that stuff, and taking time away from my family and other potentially, more lucrative opportunities than, $2 a day, effectively is what that breaks down to. That I could be doing for the benefit of myself and my family to go and tell this story. There's a distinct possibility that in going through that process and trying to get that funding and get that support, that it might not be there. And so, if I come to that dead end, then that's okay too. Because one of the things that I've learned is that if you have an idea that people want and that it's going to do well, you can usually get a sense of it right out of the gate, because people will be excited about what you're doing, even if it's only a small group of people, but there's a handful of people that are like on top of it and that are like really interested in it. It's like, okay, there's an itch out there somewhere that I'm scratching, and maybe it's a niche itch or a niche itch, like maybe it's small, and that's okay, but there is an itch that I am scratching, and there are people who are into this. And then that's the point where you say, okay, it'll go. I just need to keep pushing on it, and it'll go. But if you get to the point with, kind of a month is 2 weeks to a month is kind of the arbitrary thing that I have, because I already have an audience in place. So it's not like if I were starting from scratch, I would probably give it more time. Because like when I started Living Vertical, I started it through a documentary project that took me probably about 3 months or so to really start building momentum. But it started super small. It was just saying, hey, like I found a handful of people that were excited about it, and it was like, okay, when I'm writing to these people. When I'm talking or speaking or making videos, I'm making that for these people. And then it's like by speaking to that small group of people that I knew were invested in what I was doing and the mission that I had, more people wound up coming to it and being interested in it, even people who had really no direct connection to that specific mission, because of the fact that, it was just interesting to them that they were interested in the fact that it was something that was kind of weird and something that was a little obscure, which for those of you who haven't seen the documentary that I made or haven't heard this spiel before, and that all of you may have already heard this a million times, and if so, I'm sorry, but I did a climbing project where I climbed and lived out of a car for a year, voluntarily homeless. I mean, I was living in my mother-in-law's basement at the time, and and it's not like I had to sell a house, but thank you, Rika. Rika says that our family rocks. Well, I appreciate that. I can honestly tell you. Just trying to pull the chats back up here. I can honestly tell you that it's been worth it, but also very difficult living this way. I started this career in film and photo, if you will, from a point of having no experience, just having something that I really believed in and thought, hey, I can do something to change the way people see this. Like I was I went to college for English and philosophy. I had no professional background. I have background in communication and speaking, but I did not have any background in visual communication, and I had been working just in the outdoor industry as a climbing guide. And it was kind of this idea of saying, hell, maybe I could learn to do that. Maybe I could make that happen. And sure, how hard can it be, And but there's also definitely trade-offs. I'm 34 years old. I'm still living, with my mother-in-law. This is her house that we live in, and still trying to get on my feet, still trying to establish myself as a creative. And I've had fat years and I've had lean years, and the last year and change has been pretty lean. A couple years before that, I was having, I would have speaking gigs and stuff like that where I would make, I'm not going to say exactly how much I would make, but I can tell you that I would make all the money that I needed to live for the better part of a year in a couple of weekends just doing speaking gigs. But it's weird, like those opportunities come and go, and it's like you're here today and then gone tomorrow. And so much of that was built on just fly-by-night popularity within a community. When the industries surrounding that community get wind of you and are like, oh, here's somebody new and fresh, and then you're kind of old hat after a little bit, and then you can either continue on in that circuit by trying to be new and fresh, or you can just step out gratefully. So hey, Samuel the Great Stone, thank you for your subscription, and happy birthday to you. You very nearly share a birthday with my daughter, but happy birthday, and I feel seriously very honored that you would spend even part of your birthday here chatting with us. Very cool. So, I had the option whether I wanted to be a speaker and kind of go that route, and like doing speaking gigs for pharmaceutical companies. Hell, they found me and they asked me if I would speak and present for their companies. Absolutely loved it. In terms of a gig, you get to speak and tell people your story. It's like doing a half of a YouTube live stream, because my live streams are usually much longer than any speeches, I would, you know, give for those types of organizations. But I would, you know, get up there, give a speech, and then you're paid very handsomely. But in order to stay relevant, you have to try really hard. And there's a difference between working really hard and doing work that matters versus actually trying hard. And I felt like trying hard is very not my thing. You know, trying to be relevant and putting yourself out there. Like I said, there's a difference between working hard and trying hard. And I kind of said, you know, if I'm able to continue doing work that matters to the point where people are invested in what I'm doing and they want me to speak, then great. You know, I will not pander to anybody, but I will also not refuse anybody's invite. You know, if they want me to speak or if they want me involved in what they're doing. But I'm going to do what I feel is relevant and what I believe in and what matters and what feels right to me. And, you know, if it sells, good. And if it doesn't, then I'll do something else. And so the last year and change, I've kind of transitioned, well, last 2 years, really, I've transitioned away from doing the, you know, Class D celebrity type of thing into actually trying to broker my hard skills as a storyteller and as a content creator, and, you know, actually sell my services rather than my perspective or my persona or what have you. And it's strange because I've had a lot more success selling my personality, which I wouldn't I probably shouldn't say this, but like I wouldn't you know, if I were a company, I wouldn't, you know, I'm not a fun guy. I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think, you know, I feel like I'm much more valuable as an editor, as a photographer, as a storyteller, just through my hard skills than through my, you know, as a speaker or whatever. But again, I'm not gonna. I do second guess myself a lot. I do that, and that's problematic. I just want to respond one moment here to Samuel the Great Stone. Samuel, thank you very much for all of your compliments. I really appreciate that. I don't have, just to detour here into the world of video games briefly, I don't play video games really. I play like Zelda, like Link to the Past, like Super Nintendo, and like regular NES. I have emulators on my computer, and I have a controller for my computer here. Where is it? See, got the old school controller and the you know, USB thing for my computer, and that wastes a lot of my time. But frankly, I don't have a lot of time to spend on video games, because when I'm not making videos and editing photos and writing stuff on here, I try to be either outside or no, I don't have a Nintendo 64. Before that, like think like 10 years or so before Nintendo 64. So like I'm old enough to be your grandfather, probably, by the sound of if I'm taking a wild guess here. Maybe not literally your grandfather. I appreciate your willingness to donate 10 bajillion if you could. That's a big if, though. But hey, someday when you're, Game Boy, like the original Game Boy generation, but someday when your gaming channel blows up here on YouTube and you're like Casey Neistat, maybe you can give me a shout out and support my work at that point, if I'm still around and kicking a few, that many years down the road. In terms of pets, I don't have any pets, Samuel. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I have a cat, a little black cat. His name is Mr. Kitty, like Cartman's cat from South Park. I was way in the South Park when I got him. And I love that little cat dearly, but he lives with my brother down in Virginia. I made a movie about with my brother when I was down there logging. Samuel, I haven't watched your channel at this point. So I can't tell you specifically if I like your channel, but it sounds like you have a lot of enthusiasm for gaming and for your channel by extension. So I would say that that's a really good sign that you're on the right track if you're excited about what you are talking about, what you're creating content for. And that's largely what what I'm hoping to share a little bit. I guess that's probably the upshot of what I'm doing here. Scott's Wild Camper says, "You are a great speaker, Stephen. I am surprised you're not fully booked." I love reading these compliments out loud, but I don't only do it to stroke my own ego. I also do it just for people who may be watching this after the fact. Scott's Wild Camper says, "I think you should follow your heart." Well, I appreciate that, Scott. Samuel, have a good night. Happy birthday to you, sir. The whole thing about following your heart is really tricky, and people talk about it a lot on YouTube, and most of the really, I don't want to say glib videos, but like I've watched stuff by like Casey Neistat and Peter McKinnon and these guys that have, well, I guess Casey Neistat has millions, plural, of people. Every time he makes a video, that's like, when he was doing a daily vlog, every video was getting however many millions of views. And not to take anything away from Casey Neistat, brilliant guy, very inspiring story, great visual storyteller, interesting videos, but and very, very, very driven, motivated, hard worker, etc. But hearing somebody like that say, "Oh, you just got to stay with it, you got to blah blah blah," it's like, well, no, you had to stay with it, because that was the path that worked for you, right? Because when you got into YouTube, things were different, and not everybody's path always goes that way. And so it's really easy for people to say, and I feel like I'm kind of like and I had a feeling that this would happen. Like, I did my first documentary project. I was climbing, I was living out of a car. I literally had not enough money to make it through the rest of the month just to buy gas and food. Living in the dirt, literally, climbing. I was at Fisher Towers in Utah, Castleton Tower near Moab. Sleeping in the dirt. I got an email from a PR company that said, "Are you interested in doing public speaking?" I had never done anything like that in my life, not once, and I assumed it was like some kind of spam thing. My wife had her brother who works in IT. He's a little bit more street smart. Said, check this company out, see if they're on the level. Big PR firm in New York. They found me somehow. I don't know how. And the day that my car broke down, I signed the contract with them that would carry me for another year. And I did, a handful of work. I made some videos for them and did some speaking engagements. I loved it. There's nothing that I like more than speaking to people. Can you tell? I just love speaking to people. I love teaching. I actually was a teacher and frankly, guiding as a canyoneering and climbing guide. The majority of what you're doing really is instruction. It's teaching, but in an experiential environment, and I love doing that, especially teaching people who want to learn, who are interested in something, and who are really putting in the effort. And so I taught at a college for a while, but there again, trying to get your master's degree and get everything sorted out is super, super difficult. And so and I say difficult, not that it's hard to necessarily get a master's degree, but I know a lot of people who were working as bartenders with tens of thousands of dollars in or more in debt from getting graduate degrees that they weren't able to make any money off of because, when the market crashed in '08, a lot of the teachers that were supposed to retire, that were planning on retiring, their pensions and their stock portfolios crashed, and so then they said, "Ooh, hell with that! I'm not retiring for another decade," and they went and pushed on through, and so you didn't have people flaking off and then making room for new people to come in, and then because of that, the colleges that were anticipating being able to trim off the top salary earners off of their stack and then bring in a crop of new starting wage people, they weren't able to trim off the top, and they couldn't just can them because of union issues and stuff like that, and tenure and whatnot, they wound up having all this overhead, and there's no movement in the system. So in order to bring in new people, they would bring in people as adjuncts, which you do a lot of work, you get paid very little money, and you have zero security. Super fun job, and it was a great low risk way for me to try teaching in a college environment for a couple of years. I taught in the phys ed department at a community college. I taught life-saving classes like first aid, CPR. I met my wife actually in one of those classes, and they let me develop some curriculum for hiking classes, basic outdoor or basic wilderness skills, and a rock climbing class that I taught kind of indoor and outdoor type of thing. So until we got a cease and desist letter from the college's insurance company, who found out about what we were doing, and it was too bad because it was an awesome program, and the kids were, it was really small, a community college, but this is like an urban community college where none of the kids were like thinking of themselves as having this as an opportunity. And I was like, dude, I grew up right around here, there's climbing right around here, like this is something that is available to you, let's go outside and do this thing. And it was super fun while it lasted, but the whole thing about following your dreams, I guess, is the point that I'm getting back to. Is I do agree with that. I do still believe in that. And when I watch videos from guys that are talking about what it was like and how everything pays off and it's worth it, it's really hard, frankly, for me not to be jaded. I mean, I intentionally force myself, I don't allow myself to mutter negative things under my breath when I watch Peter McKinnon in his like everything's awesome, everything's right with the world, happy-go-lucky, personality-filled videos that look amazing and they get billions of views, and you know what I'm saying? Like I try not to get jaded and go down that path and like fall into that black hole of just like easy for you to say, you jerk, because I don't feel that way. Like I understand that probably is his reality. Like that's the way it is from where he is. But there are a lot of other people who have, myself included, where I went from zero to, in my mind, what I considered being on top of the world. Not to where I was a household name, but the people within the community and the industry that I needed to be known within, they knew who I was. And it was a combination of making some mistakes and kind of taking a detour away from the things that I was good at into things that I was not good at, because I thought I had to do everything by myself. And also, I made some bad decisions business-wise by treating people as friends instead of business associates, and being more guarded in the way that I handled my business, because I assumed that if people talked to me like my friend, that they were actually my friend, because, hey, we both live with this chronic illness, we're both like, at risk here, we're both trying to change the world just a tiny bit, like, you're not going to try to take my bread and butter away from me by like screwing me over and tanking my pitch to this company so that you can try to get them to go with you instead of me, like. And that's exactly what happened, at least to one of the companies that I was working with. And, lessons learned after it was too late. But, I went from having nothing to having everything that I needed, which was awesome because I was getting paid to speak to people about stuff that I loved and to be who I was as just a climber. And an outdoors person who was sharing the power of being outdoors and the wonderfulness of being out in nature and how that can change your life, and how telling that story, the creative process was all part of that, of course. And then I went from that to not having money to, even rent an apartment in Utah, having to move back to the East Coast, finding out that I'm about to be a dad at the same time, having to take a job in a cubicle that was not, the organization I was working with was not run well. Living in Massachusetts after being a, on the road climber, photographer, documentary, whatever, all the hats that I've worn, but living life very much on my own terms, and then going from that in a wild, beautiful, spectacular place that inspired and challenged me into a place where I have no community, no connection. I'm relying on relatives just to survive, and I can't support my family well enough to be able to do, to follow that dream. And, it's a step amongst the stairs, it's part of the process. But when you're 34 years old, you want to feel like you're heading towards, like, you're on that path where you got to be. And I'm 34 years old. I know what I want to do, or I think I know what I want to do, but I don't know if there's a way to do it for me, without completely derelicting my family and my responsibilities, in a way that will pay. Because you get past that certain point where you can just put in time and live on ramen noodles and stuff like that, where that no longer is an option. And now you have a wife with expectations who wants to live a certain way and who doesn't want to live out of a car. And you have, the type of cameras and the work that you're trying to shoot you can't do while you're living out of a car. And you have a 3-year-old, and she ain't going to live out of a car or out of the back of a trailer, which is what we tried last year. And I give my wife a ton of credit. I mean, she's been very patient, but at the same time, like, being very candid about this. Like, there's a limited amount that favor and love and relationships will buy you. People have limits. People get to the point where they're just like, keep your shit. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And so, that becomes part of the problem. Not that that has ever been an exact ultimatum, but it's like, it doesn't have to be said to realize that you are putting a lot of stress on somebody else when, when things don't work out. And that makes, it's kind of a cascading effect of like, okay, well, now how do I live my dream? Like, what do I kind of fell, how do I get back up? And like, once you're down, it's so much harder to get back up. And I've been down for the last several years. And I don't talk about that exactly a lot on my channel because I don't really know how to talk about that. It's really depressing, and there are a lot of days that I can't bring myself to face a camera. Like, I can't bring myself to just like give anything to anybody because I feel completely empty and worthless. And I know that I'm not. It's not like conceptually where I'm like, you know what, I really am worthless. I'm going to just delete my channel and like, sell all my stuff on eBay. It's not like that, but it's a feeling that I recognize that I have to struggle with. And some days it's just like, okay, not today. I'm going to just go, play with my daughter and, look at pictures that I've taken, or like put my phone away, or, just completely pull back for a little bit, because otherwise I just feel really crushed because of the fact that, I say because of, I don't know, maybe it's because of something else. But like, there was a time when I was like, my stock was rising, and now it's like, I'm just like, it's not. And now the burden that I have to lift to get back up to the point where I can live my dream, it just seems insurmountable. It honestly seems completely impossible. And it's hard to get to that point where you're like, okay, I have to be realistic. I am never going to be back. I'm never going to have that opportunity again. I'm never going to be in that position again. That's a thing of the past. It's gone and it's done. End of story. Close the book. Done. It's hard to let go of that stuff in that way. So a willingness to suffer, I think, is, blessed are those who live out their dreams, as my friend and mentor from a climbing standpoint, climbing mentor, Frank Sanders from Devil's Tower, something he always says, blessed are those who live out their dreams. And I think that those who want to follow their heart, you better be prepared to have it tested, because the good is good, but the bad is that much worse after you've tasted the good and then lost it, and then feel like you're never going to be able to get it back. Sorry, I know that's a little bit of a downer, And I don't mean to say that to disagree with the idea of living one's dreams, but like, you know, being on Instagram, it's funny, my wife sent me this article about the van life hashtag, and like how like this is a thing now, mainstream, you know, society is like talking about the phenomena of the van life, the hashtag van life people. And I'm like, you know, and I told her, I was like, you know, we really were doing that before it was cool. Like before social media was a thing, before like when Facebook still was only for people at specific universities, we were living out of a car and traveling. And it was like when blogs were hot, when blogs with a B, blogs, and MySpace were like Snapchat is today. And this may or may not mean anything. These references, I'm dating myself here. It may not connect depending on what age group everybody is here that I'm talking to. But when blogs were like Snapchat, we were out living the van life before there was a van life hashtag. And, you know, peak too soon, peak too late, you know, and then we tried doing the van life thing and making a go of that with our daughter, you know, last year. And of course there's a playlist, I think, yeah, on my channel page here. Where is it? Yeah. A playlist I have on my channel page called I Used to Live in a Tiny Trailer. That was all about 2015 and 2016 when actually New Year's Day, my very first vlog that I ever made, has 169 views. That was my very first vlog when we began the process of buying a tiny little scamp trailer and living on the road doing the van life thing. And boy, it just crashed and burned, figuratively, not literally, but you know, going from a position of trying to say, okay, you know, we can make this work. We're going to live the van life and we're struggling, but once we get into, this was my thought process, okay? And so this may make you reconsider whether or not you want to subscribe to my channel or to even take anything that I have to say with any seriousness. But I thought in my mind, okay, I'm working a job that is hateful. I hate the job. The people, the management are just like completely detached with reality, from reality. I have 2-hour commute each way, so 4 hours of my day are spent on a train. I go to work and my daughter is sleeping. I come back from work and my daughter is sleeping, and my body is deteriorating from sitting at a desk constantly. But you know, I have a paycheck and I'm happy with that. What I should do in this situation, right? Why don't I quit my job and I'm going to become an independent contractor? But wait, we can get a trailer and we can live on the road with our daughter. And this is what I pitched to my wife. And it's like, look, I can do freelance work and, you know, sponsorship, maybe sell advertisement on the trailer. Like, I have an Instagram following that's growing. You know, this is going to fit really, really well with Instagram. We're going to be able to do the vlogging, and I just got on YouTube. I know this is going to be a thing, and I have a client right now. The job that I'm leaving, bless their heart, they're willing to, be my client and kind of restructure our relationship so that I can do work for them remotely, just media work. But we'll make this freelance media stuff work, from pulling a little 13-foot trailer with a 2-year-old and us. And that was my pitch for that was my idea of a successful pitch. Like, this is a good idea, I thought, once upon a time. And so then, of course, you get on the road and it's just like, oh man, I don't have enough battery in the trailer to run my laptop for more than 15 minutes. It's hotter than the devil in here. We can't cook food and have a computer open, and we have a little 2-year-old that doesn't want to be trapped in a trailer, that wants to yank everything off the shelves and pull everything down. And I mean, whatever you can imagine about living in a small space, just multiply that times at least 10, because there's so many things that wouldn't come to mind, like not being able to stand up straight while I was cooking. And it's like, okay, I got to make a meal, but now I'm like this because my head is touching the ceiling in the highest part. And it's like, okay, this is I'm going to do this for the next however many years. This is my home now. This is my life. I am making food, and I can't stand up straight. You know, and then it's like, oh, I need to do work. Well, where are you going to send? Where do you go for privacy so that you can do some video editing? So that you can. Where do you go for internet when you're in the backcountry in Idaho and there's no Wi-Fi there? Well, you know. So I'm not sorry that we took the risk. I have wonderful videos, wonderful photos, wonderful memories, and the question now, kind of bringing this full circle, is not do I give up or not do I, you know, succumb to just like, oh, I'm going to live in my mother-in-law's closet for the rest of my life and I'm just going to give up on everything that I believe in, because I believe in freedom, I believe in adventure, I believe in open spaces. I really believe that there is a huge value to being connected with nature, and not in a like warm, fuzzy, kumbaya sort of new agey kind of way. I think that like there's intense reality that comes from the lack of care that nature has for you and me. You know, I rediscovered this and I reconnected in a lot of ways. You know, I haven't been climbing as much and I haven't been doing the fun stuff outdoors. But when I went down to Virginia to log with my brother and like felling trees, you know, you realize that these trees are beautiful, and like being outside and working outdoors is magnificent, but like you see a tree come down, like even a small tree, and that thing just blows up. And I mean, you look at that and you're like, holy crap, that's not a, like, I wouldn't look at that tree and think, wow, that's a huge tree, I better watch out for that. But you see that thing come down at 9.8 meters per second squared and hit the dirt, boy, you realize nature cares not how bitchin' you are. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous, and that's very real. It's very sobering. It's very makes you feel alive, because every decision that you make matters out there, and that's one of the reasons why I think that it's super important. At least for me, it's been really important to connect with natural stuff in everything that I do. So that's my hands-on, not super. You know, it's not the most earth first type of way to look at conservation, but I think that that's helped me to connect. Andy Arts says, what wisdom do you have for me? I'm in the process of starting to put together an idea for a film about Barry Blanchard, a friend of mine. Oh, wow. Barry Blanchard is a friend of yours? Dude, Barry Blanchard is, that is a name that I know. I don't know him personally, but wow. Wisdom. Well, I would say the wisdom that I can offer you is that you need to you need to maybe see if you have a spot on your crew for me, because I would love to be part of helping you at making a film about Barry Blanchard. But if that's something, and I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but if you ever have need or opportunity for my assistance, you can get a hold of me. Just drop me a private message or an email, or find me on social, or what have you. So yeah, in terms of, you know, a film about Barry Blanchard, I think that, you know, it's good to start off from a standpoint of having a handful of films that you would like it to be like, that you're modeling it after. And actually, the very most recent episode of Hey Indie Filmmakers podcast with Griffin Hammond, they talk about the structure of a story, basically, and kind of how that lines up. And I think there's a variety of different ways that you can do it. I think that having a clear idea of what it is that you want to go out there and shoot as a starting point. It's like you got to get a starting point for what you want to do, and, you know, some sort of a project, some sort of unknown, some sort of challenging thing, and whether or not it's the challenge that winds up being the main challenge. In other words, the movie that I published a couple of weeks ago, The Scenic Route, which was about you know, my mini epic on a route that probably is, you know, most competent climbers could do in their roller skates. But my partner and I wound up having an epic, but the struggle in that was not necessarily about the obvious thing. It's like climbing the mountain wasn't the challenge. It was getting off of the mountain and having to deal with diabetes and weather, the less obvious challenges. So I went into that thinking this is going to be about climbing the mountain. I came out of it realizing that this is actually about much more than that. And I don't know how well you know Barry, but I think that the more time you can spend and the more comfortable you can get him, and you can, the more minimalistic or the less intervention that your camera brings into the situation, the more natural it feels to have the camera out there and to be shooting. So if you guys are pretty close, then I think that, that could obviously be a huge asset. And I think that one of the decisions that you have to make is, like, do you want to shoot this? And you don't necessarily have to have this predetermined, but I think it could be helpful to have an idea of whether or not you want to be part of this film. Is this like, I'm the narrator of this film, I'm making this film about this guy who's, my brother from another mother, as you say, and this thing that we're going to do, and this is about our adventure? Or is it more of like a biographical thing that rolls into one specific adventure, like, one specific adventure that is the main thing that you're documenting, but then with a little bit of background context that kind of brings people an overall familiarity with him so that the whole thing really centers on and revolves around him. Those are two options or two ways that I've seen most documentaries go. So more about Barry the person, not so much about the climber. So I've seen that done not nearly as much, unfortunately, because most climbing movies are usually about the climbers. Are usually about the climbing part of things, or usually just, bro bras and beanies, hucking off boulders. But to start with, one thing that I think could be a really good starting point that I have used in some of the things that I have to do a better job with, because this is something that I'm learning, but if you start by asking him to go through a photo album with you, and what I would do is even just leave the camera out of it to start with, and just roll a bunch of audio, because audio is, the data consumed is so minimal. You could take really good high quality audio and look through a photo album and use that to capture the stuff that he's saying, because there probably will be snippets that you're going to highlight. You jot down something and be like, oh, that would be something good to have, where you're going to come back to that. And I think that in looking through that photo album, you're going to hear the one thing that's like the bookend that is the starting and the end of your story. Because the story is already there. The question is, you just have to like hollow it out, but it exists already. It's just kind of, you have to put your hands on it. And one of the things I did, I shot and I haven't edited this yet, and I would like to shoot more of it. But basically, it was my friend Martin, who is in the scenic route, that film, with me. His dad was the head of search and rescue for Parks Canada for like 40 or 35 years. He's from Switzerland, and this little nondescript old fella, the nicest, most sincere guy you ever want to meet. You would never think that this guy was spectacular, and like he put up so many first ascents in the Canadian Rockies, mostly in the Canadian Rockies, both rock, alpine, a lot of mountaineering stuff. He was the guy who like mentored Fred Beckey and Chenard and Royal Robbins and all of those guys when they were like dirtbag kids the first time they came up to the Columbia ice fields, because he was the head of search and rescue there. He was like in charge of all of the climbers and everything. He was the one keeping track of all the routes, cataloging everything. Like, he was the man. And they were like, these upstart kids, and he went out and did some routes with them and like, helped them and learned from them and they learned from him, and like I had no idea when I met him, because I met him completely randomly through Martin, because Martin has type 1 diabetes as well. And when I was doing my first climbing project / documentary thing, Martin emailed me randomly and was like, hey, let's go climbing together. And I was like, sure. Hey, you're 1,300 miles away from me, and and you want to go do some alpine climbing, and we've never met, and we both have a serious chronic illness. Sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. And so I didn't know him or his family at all. And so I pulled into his driveway. I drove from Las Vegas to Edgewater, British Columbia in about a day and a half with my wife. And we were both kind of sick and tired, and it's just like long drive. We get out of the car, and I see my friend Martin come out and his parents, and I'm just like, and I see his gear. And his gear is stuff that it literally looked like somebody had bought it from a yard sale, that like somebody had an estate sale who used to climb back in the 1970s, and they sold all their old neon climbing equipment that was all nylon 1-inch tubular webbing with like, iron crampons that were like iron crampons that looked like something very medieval. External frame backpacks, really thick ropes. I mean, everything but hobnail boots. Like just this side of hobnail boots and like gold line hemp rope. Okay. And I see this on the porch as we pull up, and like he's standing there, his parents are there, and I look at my wife and I'm just like, we're both thinking like, what did we get ourselves into? Because like you don't know who people are, like it's just the internet, you don't really have the chance to vet them, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. And so of course that was the very incorrect first impression. Once I started talking to his dad, and then I began to understand who his dad was. I had never heard his name before, but he told me a little bit about some of what he had done. They're just so modest and so humble that they didn't brag about stuff, but it just blew me away. It was like going into, speaking of yard sales, like you go into a yard sale not expecting anything, you buy something, and then you find out that it's some incredibly rare, valuable like gem that you just found in some little trinket that you didn't expect it to be anything. And it was amazing. So I've always wanted to get his story. And so that's what I did the last time I was up there, and we actually named my daughter after my friend Martin's mom. Her name is Lilo as well, and that's my daughter's name. And so last year we took Lilo up there, and the Lilos met, and it was really fun. And I took a little, like, the most inspiring thing to me about this guy is his just love of simplicity and love of being outside. Just so non-pretentious. And I don't know another way to put it, but like there's so much that comes off to me, and this might be a little bit judgmental or just my own personal beef, but a lot of outdoor industry stuff, it sounds preachy, and it sounds disingenuous, and it sounds just like smarmy, like, oh, Earth first, make Mars our bitch type of thing, like just very disingenuous. I don't know how else to say it. Just pretentious. And because it's very, it's stylish to be into conservation and, all these other things. And I mean, it's great, that people are, but a lot of the films, like, it's become a trope. And this guy, he's just, I mean, there is not an ounce of pretense. He's just full of, I don't know how else to put it. It's a rare type of person that when you meet somebody like that, you're just like, man, I need to document you and preserve. It's like discovering a lost tribe of people that you didn't know existed on that level, that you're like, this is just so valuable. I need to get this and give this to other people. And so basically what I did, to make a long story excruciating, I came to, after we got down out of the bugaboos and made the last film where me and Martin were climbing, I spent, about an hour, couple hours with his dad. I did not do justice, and I think I may try to go back up there this summer if I can, and maybe shoot something in a little greater depth, because what I've learned in the last 5 to 6 months, 8 months since I was up there about filmmaking is just a whole nother level. And so I look now at what I shot with him, and I'm like, man, I could do so much better. And I want to do justice to what, his perspective on life. And so what I did was, it was kind of a similar thing where it's like, okay, here's, an older guy. He doesn't climb anymore. He still hikes like 18 kilometers. He's 80 something years old, and he's beaten cancer twice, I think. He's 80, 82, 83. I think he's 84 now this summer. He's 84. So he's a tough guy, but he goes out hiking like he takes it very, very seriously. He reminds me, it's very, very reminiscent of Uli Steck. I think it's that like Swiss mentality, just that religious, rigorous attention to hard work and just loving hard work. Anyways, I just sat down with him. I said, I want to hear your story. And he's like, well, I don't know what to tell you, blah, blah, blah. He's like, it's just kind of, I just go out in the mountains with my friends, and that's what I love doing. And so, but once we got into the photo album, things really started to unfold from that point a lot more. And I think that, I didn't have the time to shoot a really in-depth piece of work with him there, but if I were, and hopefully I will, get a chance to go back and shoot more with him, I think that would definitely be the basis, because going through that, really the simple life is really the takeaway point that everything boiled down to. It's like the beauty and the joy of simplicity. And coming from a guy who's seen a lot of stuff, who's lived through, world wars, and, recovered many dead bodies out in the back country, and had to deal with a lot of, challenging stuff, but to find joy in the simplicity, and like growing a garden, and, painting his own house, and walking, 18 kilometers a couple of times a week, that's something that to me, that's the thing that resonated with me. And if you can find that one thing that's like, because the way it always works in my head, and I don't know if this is something that is useful or that works for other people, in my mind, I always am seeing the opening sequence, and I'm hearing the opening like 15 seconds of narration before like the music and then the scenery goes, before it starts, you really meet the character. That first little bit, if I know what that opening quote, it's just like when you're writing a paper. Like I approach it, from in the same way that I approach writing an essay. The intro, body, conclusion, and if like I know what the intro is going to say, then I think the end and the middle come together from that really well in my experience. And it's like it's something that I hear in my head when I'm like, yes, that theme, that resonates with me. I can hear that in the narration. I can see that. I can see the opening scene being played over that, and then I know that's at least the starting point for where I'm going to go, and what I'm going to do with it. And then once I have that direction on my part, and I know what I'm feeling, then that guides and directs my questions a lot, and gives me the opportunity to get better stuff and think a little bit more cohesively. But that's always the starting point for me. Very long answer, and hopefully somewhat helpful. Andy Art says, check out my beginner's movie, The Belayer to the Stars 1 and 2. It's something that I always wanted to redo, so it could be way better. Banff Film Festival said it was a great story, but up to par. But I'm assuming you meant not up to par, based on the but that was in that sentence. And I probably will get a kick out of it. I will check that out. Love to see that. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been yes, Andy, thank you very much for chatting and for hanging out here. By all means, get in touch anytime. I'm at Living Vertical on all social media stuff, or you can just drop a comment on any video, and I'll see it and get back to you. here too. That would be fine. But thanks for checking out the live stream. I appreciate it. Just making sure my microphone battery. I have a 9-volt battery in a adapter that allows me to use a shotgun XLR mic into my iPhone. So I just always have to check to make sure that 9-volt phantom power is still on. Although I'm assuming that one of you guys would tell me if it were not working. Anyways, yeah. So I am at which I should open each live stream by winding down, because when I wind down, that's when everybody, asks, oh yeah, I got a quick question. And of course I love answering questions. I won't pretend otherwise. So anyways, I am at the point of winding down though, since it's been 90 minutes of me talking straight, predominantly. So at this point I'm going to start wrapping things up. If you guys have questions, comments, anything that you want to touch on about anything that I mentioned already so far, about documentary stuff and kind of how that process works, whether something completely unrelated, something totally different, cameras, anybody want to, bash on any camera companies, we want anything like that, I'm open to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up this live stream and thank you guys for your time and for, checking it out and being part of this. I really enjoy it, and I appreciate it. All right, well, that looks like that is it for this week, guys. Thank you very much, and ladies, thank you very much for for being on here. And next week I am probably not going to do a live stream because I'm going to be at my dad's, and he does not have internet. So I am going to probably skip next week live streaming, but we will be back the week after that. And of course, I will have videos every Tuesday and Thursday right here for you guys if you're subbed to the channel and have enabled notifications, ideally. And if you like what you see, let me know. Tell me how I can make it better. Always interested in hearing from folks that are part of my audience, because I want to hit the nail on the head. Oh, awesome. Scott's Wild Camper, you're going away to Sky next Friday. I've been meaning to go there for a long time. And one of these years, either maybe this summer or next summer, I have friends over in Scotland. I think I've mentioned before in the live streams to you that I have friends over there, and they've offered to take me up to Sky, and I would love to do play with cameras out there. It's a really magnificent landscape. So have fun, enjoy that. Guys, so I will not see you next week, but I will have videos Tuesday and Thursday for you, and I may even put in a pre-recorded video for you guys on Friday in place of the live stream. So you're still getting 3 opportunities to interact with my content and with me indirectly, I guess. But also feel free to follow on social media, because I'm always pretty active and responsive on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where I am at Living Vertical on all of those mediums. So, all right, guys, gals, have a good night. Thank you, and we will see you on the next episode on Tuesday, the Adventure Photo Show. Take care, guys.